Now, the word endgame is often thrown around when discussing video games, or video game aspects for that matter, and while the definition can somewhat vary from game to game, it generally refers to the state just before the ending of the game, just before maybe the final boss. And yes, in some games it can even refer to the stage after killing the final boss if the game allows for that kind of exploration. But today, in today's example, that being Subnautica, I'll be focusing on endgame that comes before beating the game, as Subnautica does not allow you for further exploration afterwards. In this video, in fact, I will be criticizing the endgame in Subnautica, and I'll be discussing why I think this stage of the game is lacking and has been somewhat of a letdown for a lot of people. Now, I have to put a quick disclaimer in here that yes, even though everything I will be saying will mostly be criticism, I still really like Subnautica, and I think that all of the facts that I will mention together do not take away from the overall positive experience I've had with the game. And if you're out there and you like these types of gathering and crafting games, and you like the underwater and would like to explore a beautiful and compelling underwater world, you should absolutely get this game, and you should not be deterred by any of the small criticisms that I will be pointing out today. And just to clarify, when I say endgame in Subnautica, I mostly mean after you've gained access to the first sea dragon and that level of depth. I know the definitions can kind of vary, but this is the point I will be referring to. Now, with that out of the way, we'll jump into the video. I will point out 3 things that I think mostly hurt the endgame, and while these are directly linked to Subnautica, I'm sure you could, if you wanted to, find some parallels to other games as well. A lot of the points I'll be taking actually come from the Subnautica subreddit. A few days ago I made a comment there where I expressed my opinion that the endgame is somewhat lacking, and I outlined a few reasons why I think that, and I actually got a lot of people agreeing with that and pointing out their own reasons. So today I will be kind of gathering those and trying to put them under the game design look and see if I can kind of combine them together into 3 points. These, in my opinion, are going to be number 1, the overuse of a mechanic, number 2, the stripping of the core gameplay loop of the game, and number 3, lack and removal of any compelling danger. Now let's go over these one by one. The overuse of a mechanic, which I think is a big one, and is in this case referring to the gathering mechanic. Of course, it's a crafting game, so you would expect that you will be doing a lot of gathering, finding materials, and putting them together for crafting. That's not the problem. Where the problem stands for a lot of people is that rather than having to require new materials as you've progressed through the game, what the endgame requires you to do is simply gather more of the same. Remember that titanium ingot that you needed to craft to build your sea moth 10 hours ago? Well, now you have to get it again, just more of them. And yes, there are other new resources that you will be adding, but mostly these are just small 1 or 2 additions added to the overall scheme that is super familiar because you've been literally repeating it the entire game. The reason why the overuse of a mechanic is problematic is because it doesn't introduce anything new. It simply reuses that which has been done a lot, and if you think about this in other games, it is always annoying. You know how people complain when in Dark Souls you will have a boss, and then later in the game you will have another boss that's just 2 of the boss that you fought at the start? Yeah, it's the same type of deal. And it directly leads me to my second point, where I think Subnautica strips a really big chunk of its core gameplay loop out as soon as you approach the end game. Now, what a gameplay loop is in a video game is kind of how you can imagine the player progressing through the world, how they do certain actions that lead to certain rewards that lead them back to doing more of a certain action. As a very simple example from Subnautica, you explore to find materials for crafting, to craft better equipment, to be able to explore more. Now, the problem with the end game, unfortunately, is that the big chunk of exploration is pretty much completely stripped away from the loop. After you've found the first sea dragon, chances are your equipment is in good enough state for you to be able to explore everything that the game has to offer, as the depth doesn't really increase that much afterwards, and once you get your second upgrade for the prawn suit, you can go all the way to the deepest point of the game no problem. Linking it back to the first point, since you are farming the same materials you've been farming the entire game, the exploration is completely removed. You know exactly where you want to go and you know exactly where you want to get. So rather than the game introducing intricate and interesting gameplay onto you, it only requires time from you and dedication to get those materials. This is also finally linked to my third point, which I call the lack of any compelling danger. And yes, while there are creatures like the Reaper Leviathan and the Sea Dragon, the big problem is once you've met and encountered them once, you will very quickly realize that they don't actually pose that much danger to you. Unless you act really stupidly and like swim close to them without any protection, you will mostly be fine, especially with the upgraded prawn suit. There's only very little these creatures can do to you, so even the final interesting aspect of the non-existing exploration that could have been there, the possible danger of a creature swooping in and killing you, is kind of removed and dulled at the best. This leads to a complete break in what Subnautica was at the start, which was you delving every time a bit deeper, exploring this unknown world where you don't know what could be lurking behind every corner, finding these new fantastic materials and blueprints, and rather just turns it into like shopping in a grocery store. You know exactly what you want to get and you know exactly where you need to find it, so it's all about just spending some time going there, putting it into your cart, and then going back over and over and over again. Now, I'm not saying there's an easy fix for this. In fact, I'm sure there isn't, because if it was easy, then the developers would have done it already. Also, I'm not saying that I know exactly how to fix it, but there are a few things that the community seems to agree on that could potentially be big improvements to the game. I think a number one point that a lot of people point out is the better use of the biomes. Now, the biomes are like separate areas in the game that grow different plants at different depths and different rates, and a lot of these are severely underutilized. As an example, I'm sure there are a few biomes which I've visited maybe once or twice just to scan a blueprint that I know drops there because I searched it up on the wiki, and then I just left because there is literally no point for me being there. The only thing that somewhat requires you to search these biomes is one of the very last farms in the game, where you have to create some hatching enzymes that require different plants which grow in different biomes. But even this is you just entering the biome, slashing your knife once at a plant, and then leaving straight out. I am sure there was a different interesting way to use these out, maybe having to craft a thing in each of them, maybe requiring you to have a small base there that then delivers materials to you, as other people have pointed already in other videos. A lot of the world seems to be heavily underutilized for as beautiful as it is to explore. Now, this also links to having to do a few fixes to the dangerous creatures. I mean, right now there is no point to coming close to the Reaper Leviathans or the Sea Dragon. I mean, in most of the game you'll just stay as far away as you can, and they won't bother you and you won't bother them. It really removes a lot of the danger. But imagine that you, for example, had to gather a sample of their skin or something, right? That would really force you to get close to them. This would of course have to be balanced for gameplay purposes, so that you don't just lose a sea moth after a sea moth after a sea moth trying to do this. But forcing you up close and personal to these creatures can build on what is inevitably one of the most important dynamics in Subnautica, which is the kind of uncomfortableness you get in the darkness below water. You know, it's scary, it's creepy, you never know what's lurking down in the shadows. And if you actually need to go down there and you need to confront these creatures, that could add a lot to gameplay. And finally, I think the point that we can all agree on, no matter in what context, is that quality and interesting content is always, in my opinion, up there above quantity. Rather than making me farm 400 titaniums to build the final rocket, make me explore the biomes, make me gather materials from the Aurora, make me revisit the islands. The suspension of disbelief is not even a matter of question anymore. I mean, come on. It's a fantasy video game. I don't care that I can construct a rocket using some mushrooms. It's really about creating new and interesting encounters that can drive the overall gameplay forward without feeling like you're just doing the same repetitive activity over and over again. Now, that is about all I had to say towards the endgame of Subnautica. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any inputs, or if you have any things that you think I missed, or maybe things that you disagreed with, which is completely fine, please make sure to leave them down in the comments, and I try to respond to as many as I can, and we could start a really interesting discussion. If you guys enjoy this type of video, maybe check out my game design videos playlist. It's down in the description, and it has a lot of other videos regarding other games where I talk about what they did right, what they did wrong, and what could maybe potentially be improved. I wish you guys a beautiful rest of today, And I'm gonna see you all in whatever next video I make. Bye bye.